Hello and welcome to the Northern Myths podcast, where we explore the myths and legends of Northern Europe from an archetypal perspective. I'm Luke DeWolf.
And I'm Dan Larrabee.
Today we're continuing our series on the Kalevala with Kalevala Runo 5, Väinämöinen's Fishing. Now you may be saying to yourself that that's an interesting title and that may not sound like it's going to be that interesting of an episode, but we're pretty excited about this one because it finishes off where we left the Fate of Aino, which, if you remember, that one was quite an emotional episode, quite a, it took us a long time to get through, and we touched on a lot of really difficult topics there. And this one is going to wrap that up, and we're going to be able to talk about a few things in the aftermath of the Fate of Aino that are really interesting. And I think it was a good way to transition out of such a heavy story.
For sure, it's kind of a great epilogue for I guess the Fate of Aino and sort of seeing what will become of her and Väinämöinen and what we can learn from it in an archetypal way rather than the Fate of Aino was kind of a bummer of a story. It just really hammers home that life is hard and we have to do a lot of things that we don't necessarily want to do, and there are ways to get out of it, but those ways are also rough and hard as well. So there's no real good option, and we'll kind of see the conclusion of that in this one.
Exactly, and maybe just to if this is the first time you're joining us on the show in general or the Kalevala total, definitely we'd encourage you to go back and look at our first Kalevala episodes just to get started and get your bearings with us so you can follow along with this story a little bit better. But for sure, if you haven't listened to Runo 4, The Fate of Aino, we would definitely encourage you to go listen to that first, because unfortunately so much of what we're going to be talking about here is based on The Fate of Aino. So if you haven't heard that one, you'll definitely want to go and check that one out first. So
yeah, unlike the Norse stories, which most of them can sort of stand on their own, the Kalevala's it's like an epic poem, so it does have an order, and it's kind of episodic. It could be like watching your favorite TV show out of order if you're listening to it out of order. Sort of unfortunately, but still you do get it's nice that it builds on itself, and you definitely get sort of an epic feeling as it goes on.
Right. You could probably start with, in this current little mini cycle, that they have a word for it, but there's I don't remember at the moment, but this current cycle started at Runo 3. So that would be where to start if you haven't listened to any of the Kalevala episodes, but certainly definitely listen to Runo 4. So, and I think just our usual housekeeping here before we dive in and get started. First, thank you very much for listening, and your listening and your support is hugely appreciated. And if you'd like to help the podcast, support the podcast in any way, we have a few ways you can do that. First of all, the biggest way you can help us is always a review or a rating on iTunes. It just helps get us in front of more people and just shows that our show has listeners who like it. And so that's a big deal for us. So if you're able to do that, we would greatly appreciate it. All the other things you can do, such as sharing on social media, we love that. We appreciate that. And on social media, we are at Northern Myths on Twitter and Facebook. We're Northern Myths Podcast on Instagram and YouTube. We're also personally on Twitter, North Myth Luke and North Myth Dan. So those are all the best ways you can get a hold of us. These days, we get a lot of comments on our YouTube videos, actually. That seems to be the best way to comment on our individual episodes, because I wish podcasts had a better way of kind of commenting on individual shows, but we've also got them all on YouTube, which is great, because then you can go and, if you want to tell us what you think of an episode, that's probably the best way to do it. It's all organized there, and you got the YouTube comment system. And of course, if you go on our YouTube channel and check that out, a subscribe is always appreciated there too. Am I missing anything?
Oh, on YouTube, you can also click on the bell thing to get notified when a new episode comes out. Yeah, I thought we'd add that in.
Exactly. That's always one way you can keep up with us as up to date as possible. And you might notice if you're watching this on YouTube that Dan has a lovely new shirt right now. He ordered one. I haven't yet, but we've got our merchandise store that's on Teespring. We'll have the link below. And if you want to pick up some merchandise, we have t-shirts in a variety of designs. And we're not going to make Dan get up and turn around, but his says, "Find out what myth you're living" on the back. And that seems to be just one of the things that of course, that's one of the things that we try and do on our show. So it's got stuff like that, t-shirts, mugs. And we've also got a list of recommended books and music on our website. And those go to Amazon through the Amazon affiliate program. And if you like anything you see there, which is books and music and other things that we really find influential on us and that we recommend if you want to do further reading. It also includes the translations of the Poetic Edda and Kalevala that we've been going through as well. So that's just a great way to follow along with us. And we get a little bit out of anything you purchase through the Amazon affiliate program. So we definitely appreciate the support if you'd like to do that. So
absolutely. It's a great way to support us and something that we would absolutely appreciate.
Yeah, and so again, thank you for listening and joining us. It's great to have you with us, and I think we'll get into Kalevala Runo 5.
Sounds good. Travel back to the land of heroes.
Let's do it. Okay, so we're going to start off with lines 1 to 12 from Runo 5, Väinämöinen's Fishing. Back to the poem. Now the tidings were repeated, and the news was widely rumored, how the youthful maid had perished, and the fair one had departed. Väinämöinen, old and steadfast, deeply sorrowed at the tidings, wept at evening, wept at morning, spent the livelong night in weeping, for the fair one who had perished, for the maiden who had slumbered, in the muddy lake down sunken to the depths below the billows. What do you think of that, Dan?
Well, I think that it's the natural reaction to your bride-to-be or the person you've been betrothed to essentially killing herself to get away from you. I think that's, weeping like that is a very... The reaction, you can see it happening. It's very normal. I think that's the appropriate reaction. And just to recap, the reason why the youthful maid that referring to Aino, she killed herself because she had been promised to Väinämöinen to be married, because Väinämöinen defeated her brother in a magical duel, Jungian. And as sort of reparations for starting the duel and losing the duel, Jungian promised Aino's hand in marriage. And so when she found out, she was quite upset, didn't want to marry this old man in Väinämöinen. And her family were like, well, actually, no, Väinämöinen's a pretty good guy to get married to. He's wealthy, established, all that kind of stuff. And it's very clear Väinämöinen isn't some beast of a man or anything. He is actually a good prospect for a husband. He's not, there's nothing about him that is abusive or terrible. It's not. That's in a lot of like fairy tales we have, like, the beast or what have you, where the man is terrible and the princess or whatever has to escape. This is not the case here. It's a good pairing, except for the fact that Aino doesn't want to be in that pairing. Which I mean, that is a valid thing, especially from a modern perspective. Like we put a lot of value on choosing who your mate is. Back then, it would be a little different. You would often be set up, and it was more of marriage was more of like a contract and a blending of families for a variety of reasons, and love wasn't really in the mix there. Choosing your spouse for love is a very modern conception, and made it better probably. But just so that we're all sort of going from the same page and in the same context. It was different back then. That love wasn't all that important. So we have Väinämöinen very, very upset, and we've been working sort of with the idea that Väinämöinen represents culture and society, and is the wise king, as it were, of the sort of the male or the masculine archetype of life. So there's the wise king and the tyrannical ruler, and Väinämöinen, I would say, definitely follows way more onto the wise king. But Aino doesn't want to be involved with that, and it's sort of her refusal to participate in society and culture, and having to drown herself to get away. And archetypally, sort of that looks like returning to or staying in unconsciousness, and not being willing to make herself conscious and face the world as it is.
Yeah, on a symbolic level, the story of the Fate of Aino was really archetypally charged, and it dug into some really modern, relevant things, which I think is why it took a long time for us to get through it and to think about it, because it was just so serious, so heavy, and in the end, I think the biggest takeaway for me was that there are elements of culture that can be stifling to people who don't feel that they necessarily should be playing that game, or look at the game that everyone is playing. And when I say game, that's sort of just a shorthand for dominance hierarchies, or the way culture is formed in general. If you look at that as a teenager, right, and you see everyone who's got so many more resources than you and is so much more successful, things like that, it can be hard to really see where you fit there. And that's one of those things that's just a coming of age thing, finding out where you're going to fit in the world, sort of thing. But a lot of kids really have a hard time with that. And these days we're actually seeing a lot more with girls and with women having a hard time dealing with the way society is organized and things. And then seeing just how emotionally laid out it was in the Fate of Aino, that was significant, and that was hard. It was hard to deal with, because it's really putting into sharp relief how even then, when these poems were written, that they sort of had some grasp and understanding of how it can be hard for young people in general, which I think Aino sort of represented kind of as a whole, the potential of the new generation getting stifled just by the existence of culture and the idea of having to live within it. And then Aino goes out to a lake and drowns. And while the symbolic significance there, just returning to the unconscious, it's the entirety of this leads us to now back to Väinämöinen's perspective, where he has seen the tragedy that has befallen Aino. And I think in this particular context, he didn't think anything was wrong. He didn't think that there was anything that he was doing that would have caused her to do this. But from a direct causal perspective, she would not have gone and died without him being involved in her life. And what that says to me on a symbolic level is that it's without culture being involved in Aino, the potential of the new generation, or the potential, even if you want to go specific, of the girls of the generation, is getting stifled by the culture. On a symbolic level, that's what this says.
Absolutely. And it's sort of one of those necessary evils, right? Because culture provides a lot of protection against the horrors of sort of rampant nature that is trying to kill us and eat us, just as we're trying to kill and eat other things, right? Like this, how the natural game is played. But at the same time, in order to protect us, it has to rein us in a lot. And you can see the rebellion, and not, I definitely don't want to make it sound like it's needless rebellion or like silly. There is like a real sense of being controlled by culture. And, I think we all feel it, but we're all okay enough with the trade-offs. But like, teenagers, they're getting a lot of control, but they're not getting a lot of the benefit, really, or at least maybe they don't see it. And I'm just thinking like, like punk music, it's, angry teens playing their instruments as best they can, but not usually that well, screaming into a microphone. And it's a good time. Like punk music's a lot of fun, but it that's sort of the spirit that it's like, well, it should be better than this, and it could be better than this. And well, if you're going to make me do this, I'm going to, well, with the punk scene, they will do a lot of things that sort of visibly separate themselves from society, like the awesome mohawks and fluorescent hair and piercings, that kind of thing, tattoos. Aino didn't really have that option here. And actually, like, I was just thinking about this, like her brother was the one who promised her hand in marriage. So her agency was severely limited. Like there wasn't much she could do, but she took one of the things that she still had control over was her own life. And in that way was able to rebel against this. And I've just talked about how great rebellion is in punk music, but there is another downside, and she goes into the water, which is a symbol for the unconscious, and it becomes a fish. So basically lives there, and it reminds me of sort of that stereotype of like the man child who, the biggest achievement he has is like a certain amount of achievements on some Xbox game, or, doesn't really engage with society or life. And like, I'm not saying that if you play Xbox, whatever, that you're doing this at all, but there are those people who like, that's their life. And they spend all their time sort of in fantasy worlds, whether it be, their favorite television show or their favorite comic or their favorite movie. And they remain unconscious in that way. And it's kind of like that, where they've specifically and purposefully said, no, I don't want to get out there. I'm going to stay sort of unconscious and sort of undeveloped. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing here, that the takeaway for me on that is that culture as a whole, not to say that it's a monolith, but those of us who are participating in culture perhaps have to be aware of the effect that the culture can have on the people that are just coming into it. And it really is hard these days to get started, and for life to get started. And it, at the very minimum, there's got to be mindfulness on the new generation coming into the fold might be having a tough time. And we don't want to see the new generation, going and becoming unconscious, right? Which is going to result in them not getting started fast enough that they can have a nice, comfortable life. And, maybe they want to do things that are unconventional, but that's fine. If there's that rebellion against the culture needs that. The culture needs revival. What I wrote down here in my notes for this was that it's the willful blindness that Väinämöinen had towards the effect he was going to have on Aino, which means that he had no idea. He didn't see. There was no malevolence on his part towards Aino. He was not wanting to do something that was going to have such a drastic effect on her mental health. Like that's what I see here. And the thing about that, though, is that willful blindness needs to be reinvigorated in order to get past it. And, well, for me here, that just says something about at least being mindful of the things that are going on in our society that's just making kids so have such a hard time dealing with life, and there's got to be that not well. What's the opposite of willful blindness? I'm intentionally seeing what's going
For
on,
sure,
and
like
and
consciousness, and yeah,
consciousness. There, see, exactly. That's little brain fart. It's early in the morning right now, but no, I think this just says though that there was no malevolence on Väinämöinen's part, but that doesn't excuse him. He was a direct cause of Aino. Well, Aino going, and whether you want to see it as her going and rejoining the unconscious, which would be just a complete break with culture and consciously playing the game of culture, or if you want to see it as actually her death, both are bad, quite bad, and he is a direct cause of that. And I think part of this as well is like he's got to come to terms with that.
Oh, definitely. And like society, like you were saying, society has to come to terms with sort of people dropping out as well and deciding not to participate. And society will often do a lot of things to make sure people stay in the game, usually to the point of making it very hard not to play the game. So, for example, if you decide to just stay in your basement, play video games, like, okay, well, how are you going to pay the bills that will let you play video games and that kind of thing? Like, there usually has to be at least some sort of interaction with society. And then if you consciously decide to like not play on with society's rules and sort of like go off grid or whatever, society has ways of keeping you in there with regulations and taxes and stuff that you wouldn't necessarily have to adhere to or even pay if you were more like linked into society. So yeah, it's society like really wants people to participate.
Exactly. And again, there's the whole thing about this is that we're not exactly taking any position here on the benefits of culture necessarily, except for the fact that it's what keeps the lights on and it keeps the plumbing and heating and everything like that. Like, again, society does do a lot of things very well, and that's the benefit. That's what you're buying into. But the trick, though, is that it's not perfect, and we see that time after time where it's that interplay between reinvigorating the culture and the culture going stale and becoming negative for its participants, right? For most of them anyway. And so there's certainly a lot that can be done here. And the implication of what's gone on here with Väinämöinen is that he's realizing that what he was doing, the goals he was wanting to achieve, which in this case prior was to get married to Aino, that was flawed. The way he was going about that was flawed, and now he is stuck not only just in grief on a high, well on a surface level. He's just dealing with grief, right? But on a deeper level, I think that's what he's dealing with. He's dealing with that disconnect between the way he, as the representative of society and culture, was going. He definitely did something wrong there. And how do you figure that out, right? So shall we?
Yes, let's continue.
See where this is going. Okay, this is going to be lines 13 to 34. Back to the poem. Then he went in sorrow sighing, while his heart was filled with anguish, to the blue lake's rocky margin, and he spoke the words which follow. Tell me, Untamo, thou sleeper, tell me all thy dreams, O idler, where to find the realm of Ahto, where dwell Vellamos, fair maidens. Sleeper Untamo made answer, and his dreams he thus repeated. There has Ahto fixed his country, there dwell Vellamos, fair maidens, near the cloud-encompassed headland, near the ever-misty island, in the depths below the billows, on the black ooze at the bottom. There has Ahto fixed his country. There dwell Vellamos, fair maidens, living in a narrow chamber, in a little room abiding, with the walls of varied marble in the depths beside the headland.
So this part's, for me, it's interesting just from like purely story perspective, because Väinämöinen's going to an entity named Untamo, and Untamo, the name shows up a few times in the Kalevala. In this case, it's it's the spirit of sleep. And so when Untamo's talking about Väinämöinen is asking him to tell him about the dreams, and Untamo's speaking about his dreams, it's because he's sort of the spirit of sleep, and that's how he gets his knowledge. And also, he's asking him about the realm of Otto and Velamo, and they are these sort of the god and goddess of water, and they're married to each other. And so it's very interesting to me that Untamo is a sleeping spirit who has dreams and is able to tell Väinämöinen about, where Otto and Velamo's land is and where their realm is, because it's like deep in the unconscious of their water kind of thing. So I just really like the imagery there. The name Untamo will also come up later on in further runos, because he's a hero in the Kalevala and seems to have quite an epic story. But we will definitely get to that when the time comes. So essentially, we have Väinämöinen looking for Aino, going to the sleeping spirit, who is able to access that murky depth of the unconscious and water here, right? So they're really making the connection between water and the unconscious in this little these few lines here. And if you recall, it was when Aino saw Velamo's maidens that she sort of made the decision to descend into the water and drown herself. And I love how at the end of the last few lines that you covered, in the depths below the billows, on the black ooze at the bottom, like this isn't just like in the water, it's like below the water. That Aino's gone deep. Like, we're all unconscious to a certain degree because we're human and we can't see everything and all that kind of stuff. But this is like, below like garden variety unconsciousness to like just not being in any sort of a game, like any part of it.
Right. Like the imagery is just wonderful here, and how they put this together. The names that I found here, just like you said, the Untamo thing here, his name, to me, right when I saw that, I was like, that's related to the word for sleep or dream, which is uni. And when I looked at the etymology, I found a couple of things that were a little strange. Apparently, this maybe in the other context, when he is the uncle of Kullervo, which is one of the other major cycles in the Kalevala. And again, we're kind of in the middle of the first major cycle, and that's already like taken runos 3 through 6, so we're not even through it yet, but we've spent so much time just on this one. So there's like 3-4 other major story arcs, and so the one for Kullervo is one of them, and Untamo is his uncle in that context. And apparently it was an old Germanic name somehow, and it made it into Finnish, is what etymologists say about the name. But on this one, as far as him being the spirit of sleep, that one, it just makes sense to be related to the word for sleep or dream. And so that one works great. And for Väinämöinen to be talking about that actually, like, I mean, the parallel to that I see, if he's talking to the personification of sleep, something like that, this is really parallel to me to Odin in the Norse, going down into the underworld and talking to a Volva to see the future, something like that. Like, this is, he is talking to a character to gain new knowledge that he wouldn't otherwise be able to get, right? Which is very shamanic, very, very archetypal, in the sense that it's like he has to dig into things that would not normally be for a conscious person would not normally be where you would go. And that's the underworld. You don't want to be in the underworld when you're a conscious person. You don't want to be there. And going intentionally into the unconscious and being able to get something out of that, like that's dream interpretation, right? Like it's all heavy stuff that it's not accessible to the average person without a lot of practice and learning. And so Väinämöinen sort of has this question, right? Like where did she go? Where would she have gone? And he gets an answer, but the answer is not straightforward though. It's like to go underwater into the depths. This is really also saying to me, Väinämöinen has to spend some time in those depths, in that unconscious, to get the answers he's seeking. He has to go do some soul searching is really what I got from that too. So
absolutely. Like this is a very poetic, and I mean, I actually love this part, but it's a beautiful way of talking about soul searching and the depths that you have to go to. I mean, like everyone who's ever done any soul searching knows that it is like going under, and it's uncomfortable and terrible. But the right way to do it is to do it like purposefully and consciously. Like Väinämöinen, he's not just finding himself in the underworld and kind of stumbling around. He's purposefully looking for guidance within the underworld, which is very much part of the hero's journey as well, right? So this is one part of the hero's journey where Väinämöinen is definitely playing that out. And yeah.
No, this whole thing is great just to show again, if you combine it with the last section that we covered, I think this is great in the sense that it does show that Väinämöinen wants to learn from the tragedy of Aino, and maybe he's going to the first thing he can think of, which is, okay, where exactly would she have gone, right, on a spiritual level. And we have talked about how that the Finnish concept of the soul is a bit different from ours, and a bit different from the Norse concept of the soul as well. But concepts of afterlife, ideas like that, we haven't really gotten into that. And so the idea of Väinämöinen, like he's got access to magic, like his singing magic that we've covered already in Runo 3 a lot, his singing magic. But then the other side of it, though, is that there would have been some idea of where people would have gone when they died. And I suppose Aino's method of dying, drowning in the lake sort of thing, then I suppose it's reasonable that she would reside in the lake. And so maybe he's going for, like, where can I find her? Maybe I can bring her back, something like that. But also on the other side of it, the symbolic side of it, he's also being told, like, yeah, you have to spend some time, like, going through this, thinking about this. And I don't think that would make any sense if Väinämöinen was not aware that he had some part to play in all this.
Absolutely. One of the things, and it's kind of a side thing, but I've been thinking about it, is that there's a god and goddess of the water, because usually it's just the goddess, right? And I find that very interesting that I guess Finnish mythology has attributed a god to it as well. I was trying to figure out why that might be, because generally the feminine is that what was I calling it? That the chaos, the undifferentiated chaos, and there's all this potential and all this danger, and it's all sort of swirling there, and it's generally given a feminine attribution in the archetypes. And I was wondering with Otto if his role in this undifferentiated chaos, because the masculine is more like sort of the organizer and someone who puts up boundaries. I wonder if that's like seafaring, like if it's the boats that you would use, or the knowledge that you'd have of the water, together with this unknown. It's sort of that's how they would see it, right? Like you've got the god who will show you how to navigate the waters, and then you've got the goddess who is the waters. I don't have any like proof for this, but I've been sort of puzzling this through.
Yeah, the little bit I know about Ahto or Ahti off the top of my head, and it's not for sure that Ahto and Ahti are the same, but Ahti was like a sort of a heroic water figure, and things like ruling the tides. I can see the distinction, kind of it's like Njord in the Norse, where he's a sea god, but then there's also Aegir, like the god of the deep sea, and to me Njord is seafaring, something like that. So yeah, something definitely, hopefully to dig more into and learn. But Ahto or Ahti like is a major character. We just haven't really done too much with him, and I actually don't recall if he's that well featured in Kalevala specifically, but anyway, we'll certainly see. So
fantastic.
Shall we move on?
Yes.
Okay, so this is going to be lines 35 to about 72 here. Back to the poem. Then the aged Väinämöinen hastened to his little vessel, and he scanned his fishing tackle and his hooks with care inspected, put the tackle in his pocket and the barbed hooks in his wallet. Through the waves his boat he ferried, making for the jutting headland, to the cape with clouds encompassed and the ever misty island. Then he set about his fishing, and he watched his angle closely, and he held his hand net ready, dropped his angle in the water, and he fished and tried his fortune, while the rod of copper trembled, and the thread of silver whistled, and the golden line whirred loudly. And at length one day it happened, very early in the morning. On his hook a fish was hanging, and a salmon trout was captured. In the boat he drew it quickly, and upon the planks he cast it. Then he scanned the fish and turned it, and he spoke the words which follow. "'Tis a fish among the fishes, for I never saw its equal. Smoother is it than a powan, than a salmon trout more yellow. Grayer than a pike I deem it, for a female fish too finless. For a male 'tis far too scaleless. Has no tresses, like a maiden, nor, like water nymphs, 'tis belted. Nor is earless like a pigeon. It resembles most a salmon, or a perch from deepest water."
So we have Väinämöinen literally going fishing in the depths, and fishing is often a symbol of sort of delving into the underworld, but in a very controlled way. You're not just being thrown in and sort of flailing your arms about, like you're in a boat, and you've got this tool that allows you to interact with, what's below the surface without you yourself going in. So he's sort of doing it in the most like civilized way possible, of going into the underworld. And I love that very early in the morning on his, he catches this fish, and it's the most beautiful fish he's ever seen. And it's unlike any other fish that's ever been. I love the timing, because, that's when the sun is coming up. It's, night is over, and consciousness is returning to the world. That's sort of the symbolism that the dawn brings. You also see it in like the yearly cycle, where, at the like the longest night of the year in December, it's, a lot of the myths surrounding that are like, going into the underworld, where the sun dies and has to come, like, be resurrected the next day, that kind of thing. So I think we're seeing that kind of motif here, where he's well, we haven't seen it yet, but he's got this beautiful fish, and it's coming up from the depths to see the breaking of dawn. So it's almost like society has reached down and is trying to recapture or bring someone back into the game. And I would say one of the reasons why it's so beautiful, and this isn't really a spoiler alert, but the fish ends up being Aino. But there is something beautiful about a human who isn't encumbered by the rules of society, just sort of a human being a human. There is a beauty to it. And because it's untouched and it's, in a sense, it's pure. And I think that's sort of what they're remarking on with, or what Väinämöinen is remarking on as he looks at this fish who's sort of, the best fish of all the fish, even though it's, swimming around in the murky unconscious.
Yeah, this whole sequence, first of all, the idea of fishing as his first response, I suppose what he's doing there is he's doing the only thing that really makes sense in that situation, because, I mean, if he goes and drowns himself, that's not good either, right? If the response to grief, if we're thinking about that concretely, which I think we should think about the concrete aspect of grief and handling that and how you handle that, but also the symbolic, the larger picture, right? And of course, we love when things line up on multiple different levels, right? But on the side of grief, it's like, if the person grieving also goes into the unconscious, which I think I don't think I'm twisting this too much. It's sort of like you're almost dead. You're like, on a conscious level, you're not there. You're not participating in society. It's not possible, something like that. But Väinämöinen doesn't do that. He goes and tries to actually do something to process, to go and, well, maybe he is actually thinking like that he could catch Aino, something like that, from a subconscious level. But he catches this fish, and then he doesn't recognize who or what the fish actually is. That's coming up, and again, that's not really a spoiler. But the thing here, though, is that it's a form of hunting, right? Fishing is a form of hunting, but well, first of all, which brings the whole idea of competency, and you have to be good. You've got an aim. The aim is to catch a fish, and that's not so concrete as like, okay, here's this deer, let's go shoot an arrow at it, and that will definitely kill it if we hit the mark, right? With fishing, it's different. It's, well, you have no control of what's going on under the water, right? It's different. You're engaging with an unknown system, and you're just doing things to increase the chances of something being caught on your line, something like that. So it's different. So his idea of going and doing something, though, is like he's going and trying to do something. I think that's important here. He's going and doing something which takes skill and competency here, but he's also doing it in a way which interacts with the symbolic place that Aino ended up.
Definitely. And yeah, I definitely agree with everything you said there. And it's like he's gone into the underworld, but in a way that he won't lose himself. And I'm thinking of a lot of the mourning practices of various cultures and religions throughout the world. Like I know in Judaism, there's a certain amount of time that, the family of the person who's passed away, like they're not allowed to participate in a lot of society because they need that time they're being given that time by everyone around them to go into the underworld and deal with their grief. And it's actually like quite strictly enforced. So it's very interesting, like that we're seeing something similar to that, where he's going into the underworld, but not just like diving in. He's making sure that he'll be able to get back into normal life at the end. I also I really liked what you said when there's I think a societal grief when when people drop out. Certainly, like when young people die, whether it's by accident, suicide, or a kill. Like because there's a sense that there's a real loss of potential there, but like you said, he's not going to recognize her, and I think that's. Maybe we'll get into that more when that happens, but I think there's something important there about society and maybe not recognizing the potential of its youth.
Yeah, let's move on and
Yeah.
dig into that a bit more after. Yeah, when the time comes. All right, this is going to be lines 73 to 144. Back to the poem. In his waistband, Väinämöinen bore a case knife, silver hafted, and he drew the knife of sharpness, drew the case knife silver hafted, and prepared to slit the salmon and to cut the fish to pieces, thought to eat it for his breakfast, or a snack to make his luncheon, to provide him with a dinner and a plenteous supper likewise. As he would have slit the salmon and would cut the fish to pieces, sprang the salmon in the water, for the beauteous fish jumped sideways, from the planking of the red boat, from the boat of Väinämöinen. Thereupon her head she lifted, raised her shoulders from the water, on the fifth wave's watery hillock, from the sixth high wave emerging. Then her hands in air uplifted, and displayed her left foot also, when the seventh wave rose, upswelling, and upon the ninth wave's summit. Thereupon the fish addressed him, and it spoke, and thus protested. O thou aged Väinämöinen, surely I have not come hither like a salmon to be slaughtered, or a fish to cut to pieces, only to become your breakfast, or a snack to make your luncheon, to provide you with a dinner, and a plenteous supper likewise. Said the aged Väinämöinen, wherefore didst thou then come hither? In this part, this is the fish again, but we don't have that in this translation. Fish again. Therefore 'tis that I have sought thee, in thine arm like dove to nestle, by thy side to sit forever, on thy knee as consort sitting, to prepare the couch to rest thee, and to smooth thy pillow for thee. Keep thy little room in order, and to sweep the flooring for thee, in thy room to light the fire, and to fan the flames uprightly. There large loaves of bread to bake thee, cakes of honey to prepare thee, and thy jug of beer to fill thee, and thy dinner set before thee. I am not a water salmon, not a perch from deepest water, but a young and lovely maiden, youthful Youkahainen's sister, whom thou all thy life hast longed for, whom thou hast so long desired. O thou pitiful old creature, Väinämöinen, void of wisdom, thou hadst not the wit to hold me, Vellamo's young water maiden, me, the darling child of Ahto, said the aged Väinämöinen, head bowed down and deeply grieving. Sister, thou of Youkahainen, once again return, I pray thee. But she never more came near him, ne'er again throughout his lifetime, for she turned away and, diving, vanished from the water's surface, down among the rocks so varied in a liver-colored crevice.
Well, it's quite a dramatic turn of events. So, as we mentioned before, Aino is the fish, unbeknownst to Väinämöinen, until she reveals herself to him. And this part, it's sort of for me at least, it's kind of the brutal reality of society for me. Because, so we have this beautiful fish, but the value of the fish to Väinämöinen is to devour it. And I mean, if that isn't just sort of the saddest and most sort of bare bones way of describing what society does with people. I mean, the value of the fish isn't because it's a fish, it's because it will feed Väinämöinen. And I dare say the value of people to society isn't that they're people, but that there is something that people can do for society. And it's something that if we're participating in society, we've kind of agreed to, because it offers protection and stability in life that, lacks both of those things just on its own. And so in some ways we all agree to be devoured by society for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. And that's a bummer. Like that is it just sucks. Like there's no other way to pretty it up. And so we have Aino, who talks about all of the things that she would be doing for him if she, allowed herself to be with him. And, the cooking, the cleaning, and getting the couch ready, and smoothing the pillow, and all that kind of stuff, making honey cakes. That's all stuff that, as much as we've agreed to participate in society, that's what we have to do for society. We have to take care of it. And then that also means we can't just be our natural selves. We now have responsibilities. We now have things that must be done in order to fulfill our end of the contract, the social contract, I guess you'd say. And Väinämöinen has no idea until she reveals herself that this was of her value, right? And I think it's very true about society as well. It doesn't see the value of youth and individual. It's not who you are, but it's what you can do for society. And it's sort of a harsh reality that we have to face. And you can either agree, you don't even have to agree with it, but if you want to enjoy the protections and benefits of society, you have to participate in.
Yeah, and we get to a bit of a difficult question then, because if it's so unbearable to participate in society like that, what's the alternative? And the trouble with that, really the trouble, is that we don't have a better way of organizing ourselves. We just haven't come up with one. And so the thing about it is that Aino is so against participating and doing what she has to care for Väinämöinen. And I mean, on a literal level, what she is consigned to is to just basically to be his maid and probably to be available for him sexually, right? And I mean, that's not great if you're just a girl and you have no idea or experience of the world in general, and that's your fate set out for you right there concretely. Yeah, that's got to be scary. And Aino's reaction, of course, was to, well, I don't say of course in the sense of that it's the thing that makes the most sense. I say that in what she did was she left, she disengaged, right? The trouble with that is what is the alternative? And of course, now I'm saying of course differently. I'm being precise here as far as possible. Many people interact with society and succeed, and it's a good thing, and can make something good out of that, and can go explore the world and can go be themselves as far as possible. But if the effect of society on young people, girls, if you want to go specific, is going to be so daunting and so scary, if that's the role, right, then that's what Väinämöinen didn't notice. That's what Väinämöinen society, culture didn't see. That's what he was willfully blind to. And, well, now he has to deal with that. And of course, he's confronted now with his grief again, directly. He's this is almost like he's been given the opportunity to resolve his issues with Aino, and many people don't get to do that directly with someone who's died. You don't get to directly connect with them, and I mean, I think that explains why mediums and things who can reportedly talk to dead relatives or friends and that there would be a market for that, because there would be unresolved issues, and there would be things that need to be worked through for why the consequences happen. But it's not just with someone who's died, though. If it's someone who's just disengaged and gone unconscious, maybe that's even just someone who refuses to live up to their parents' high expectations, but like intentionally is what I mean there, because it's sort of like, well, hey, you expect so much of me, screw you. Like I'm just gonna go do my own thing and end up, well, not accomplishing anything, first of all, and that's true. I mean, I can't sugarcoat that. You don't accomplish anything if all you do is sit on your couch and play video games, or all you do is just disengage and maybe live your life on the internet, sort of thing. Like that's that might be hard for some people to hear, but I can't sugarcoat that. And then the thing about that, though, is that those people we can engage with, and we can sort of see what the effects are and learn from that, and that's what Väinämöinen is being confronted with here. And so this is heavy, and this is serious, and this is him really being confronted directly with the consequences of his inactions, or more specifically, his inaction, the inaction of society to take care of the potential of the young generation.
Yeah, that's sort of exactly it, right? Like, we often talk about having to go into the underworld to resurrect the father, and rejuvenate the society. And so what's going to rejuvenate the society is the younger generation. But I don't think society makes it easy for its own rejuvenation. Like it's inertia, right? It's going in a certain direction. And the younger generation is full of, vim and vigor, wants to change the world. And to be fair, a lot of times, just because they're inexperienced, the ways they want to change the world maybe have very likely been tried before and been found that they didn't work. Like that, I'll be totally honest about that. However, there is a sense that the younger generation has to almost rediscover what works. And so they can reinvigorate those social norms and, pillars of society that have worked since we've been able to, fend off the wolves at night and that kind of thing. But because society, like Väinämöinen and the older part of society is so entrenched, it can be very hard to breathe new life into it, or even rediscover the values and the strategies and tactics that made society grand in the first place.
Exactly. And the funny thing that you mentioned that I like there was that, yeah, some of the things that the younger generation wants to do aren't going to work. And I mean, if you get all the kids saying, change the world, and I mean, for the most part, that means these days overwhelmingly voting left wing sort of thing. I won't even say like sort of center left, and we don't really like to bring politics into things here, but that is the result here, right? But the result of that is that it's a lot of ideas that are meant to help people, and this is all coming from the best of intentions, absolutely, and I want to believe that too. Like for the most part, I would say my view on politicians, a lot of them is that they are in it for themselves and are self-serving and things like that, and that goes across the political spectrum for sure. But the thing about it is that the people, if you have this view or that view or whatnot, it's all good. We all need to talk about it. And the prevailing view on the left, I think, is really just let's make things easier for the people that are having a hard time, that are having some kind of a struggle, right? And that's great. That's fantastic. It's just the solutions kind of aren't there directly. It's more like getting there becomes hard when these ideas kind of get put into practice. It can be hard to create something that doesn't negatively impact society, right? And so that's where there's that got to be that balance, right? It's having the ideas, which are great ideas, which is really just to improve society in general, but then the ability to work that out. And to get back to my original point, it's just more like I think you see all these kids in like the you're right, vim and vigor or something like that to change the world. But the trouble becomes, and I think this is part of that disillusionment, is why I'm touching on this, is that change for change's sake isn't always a good thing. And that's the part of society that has figured out these things and what works and what doesn't. And maybe the trouble ends up being reconciling that, you know, the world doesn't necessarily it doesn't just work if you make some changes, and you know what's going to happen, right? It's hard to predict, and that's part of that disillusionment, I think, that, you know, can be from the younger generation that's very enthusiastic about, and I would say predominantly left of center causes, or even left wing, you know, we would call that in modern discourse sort of thing. And then it's just a case of, well, how do you get there? And then the comeback to a lot of these things is, well, how are we going to implement this in a way that isn't going to break society down? And then you see people getting older and older and moving more and more to the right across center politically. And I think some of that just is to do with embracing the way society is now, because it is working reasonably well. But then we need the new generation to reinvigorate that. So that's the pull, I think, between society as an ordered construct and the reinvigoration. And it's hard to do both of them. It's hard for any of it to work. And of course, you know, again, we don't talk about politics all that much here, but it's still, it can be easy to get disillusioned with the way politics is done in general. And it doesn't matter which side of politics you kind of find yourself on. They all seem to not work out exactly the way they hope, right? So it's just that struggle. But that is what I see there as far as the new generation.
Definitely, it's well, society is a complex system, right? And so anytime you start tweaking things, there's going to be unintended consequences that you couldn't have seen coming, because there's an infinite number of variables, right? And so it's, when you're young, you can definitely see that there are issues and problems and ways that it ought not to be. But then it becomes, well, like, what do we do to fix that? And it's like, well, you know, what if we overthrow this? Well, okay, you've overthrown it, and you've maybe you fixed this one problem, or you've made it way worse because there aren't these other things that sort of got the problem to that point of like, hey, it used to be this bad, now it's only this bad. It's still bad, but it's only this. Like, there's just so many things, and that's why like open dialogue and like people with different ideas speaking that with each other I look at it, and this is probably maybe naive or wishful thinking on my part, but it's sort of like we all see the same problems and all agree that they need to be fixed. We just maybe disagree on how you fix it properly. And then, like, I mean, that goes, then you start dividing up into teams, and then, you know, you start forgetting about the problem, and it's just, no, my team is right, your team is wrong. And that, I mean, that's politics in general. But I think we're seeing that here, where society doesn't necessarily do a great job of that, but it's still there. And there is it's all about balance. I think we're seeing that you definitely need that structure. That, I mean, look at how powerful Väinämöinen is. He's at the top of all the dominance hierarchies. He's able to do these incredible things, but at the same time, maybe there isn't enough of the like the unknown or the wildness or the chaos there to rejuvenate it properly, to rejuvenate Väinämöinen properly. And he's at a point where he can't even recognize it when it's, there in his boat.
Yeah, I think in this particular case, I'm getting to that neither one has things right here, Väinämöinen or Aino, and Aino doesn't know how to engage with society, but Väinämöinen doesn't know how to engage with Aino, which is, I mean, she is the symbolic feminine here in this case. So this is just not just, there's more to it, but what I'm seeing this kind of on a larger level is just the ability for the masculine, the order, to deal with the feminine, the chaos. They're just having a hard time interacting with each other in this case, and that's speaking to just a society that is, in this case, I would say it's something like the paralyzed society that can't get anything done. I don't mean to trivialize the very personal aspect of these stories or anything like that. And on a symbolic level, I mean, if you've been following along with us, I think you know that we encourage the mingling of order and chaos in order to create something new and something greater. That's what we encourage because we've seen it through these heroic stories. We're not saying that this is the way things should be or anything like that because of any kind of agenda. This is the way things are as they are meted out through this mythology, right? And this is another example, except this isn't an example of a hero story. This is an example of, I suppose, the society requiring the hero, which does not exist yet. This is a really dark cycle. This is a really dark cycle talking about a society just in complete rot. That's the way I interpret it anyway, is from the beginning of it with Joukahainen and him trying to overthrow Väinämöinen. He's trying to be this upstart, right, and this hero, and he ends up getting defeated hard. And then he offers his sister the potential of his generation to Väinämöinen as sacrifice. And while she doesn't like that, she doesn't handle it and just disengages, and no one gets any of what they want here. And this whole story is tragic. And I think the only thing we can do with something like that is to look at what they're doing and say, like, there's got to be something better.
Absolutely. And it's funny because in a lot of mythologies throughout the world, Väinämöinen and Aino would get together, and their offspring would actually be like the hero, the shining example of everything, who would bring the people to the promised golden age that was lost, at the very beginning, like sort of like Balder, right? Like Odin and Frigg have the son Balder, who is the best at everything, and who will preside over the golden coming age after Ragnarok. Well, this one is sort of like, it's not that the myth is incorrect, because I mean, this is often what happens, but it's kind of like a misfiring where you've got the ideal where, the masculine and feminine come together in society to produce something new and grand, but here they weren't able to connect. And like that's a serious thing, and that I don't know if there's some sort of like grand Ragnarok apocalyptic thing in the Kalevala, but you can see where in various mythologies throughout the world, this is the type of thing that would lead to that. Like even with Norse mythology, it's the death of Balder, so it's the lack of that offspring that leads to the complete disintegration of everything. And it's just like, this is that important.
Yeah. And we're gonna see where this all goes in the huge meta cycle, the 50 poems, which we're only five into. So look at this, we're a tenth of the way in, and we've already spent I don't even know how many hours on this already. Which is a good thing. We're in this one for the long haul for sure. But should we move on?
Yes.
Okay. This is going to be lines 145 to 164. Back to the poem. Väinämöinen, old and steadfast, pondered deeply and reflected what to do and what was needful. Quick, he wove a net all silken, and he drew it straight and crossways, through the reach and then across it, drew it through the quiet waters, through the depths beloved by salmon, and through Väinälä's deep waters, and by Kalevala's sharp headlands, through the deep, dark, watery caverns and the wide expanse of water, and through Joukola's great rivers and across the bays of Lapland. Other fish he caught in plenty, all the fishes of the waters, only not the fish he sought for, which he kept in mind forever. Never Vellomo's fair maiden, not the dearest child of Ahto.
So we see Väinämöinen searching for Aino, trying to recapture her. And he actually is able to capture a whole bunch of other fish, but just not her. And I kind of look at that as how society is able to, I don't know if appeal is the right word, but at least convince the vast majority of people to participate in some way, even if it's kind of a minimal way. And that can be done, well, it's done fairly easily in that if you want to have shelter and eat and have any bit of fun in life, you need, generally in the West, you need to make money or have resources to spend towards that. And one of the ways to get resources is through societal norms and through participating in society. So Väinämöinen is capturing a whole bunch of people who are willing to sign up and be a part of society, but not this one that would, I would say, rejuvenate the society.
Exactly. And he's also doing what he was just doing before, just on a larger scale. It's like he's trying the thing that didn't work. He's trying it more, right? And that's sort of like the reaction of, well, okay, this must not have just worked just this one time. Let's keep trying it, and maybe we'll get the result. Or it's also the only thing he can think of to possibly get Aino back. And yeah, none of it works out. He can't catch her, and he catches all these alternatives. So he's accumulating resources, but he's not achieving his goal. So yeah, the entire thing here is just maybe this is just a reaction, right? Like not necessarily knee jerk or anything like that. It's just more like his reaction is to try to do something to get her back, and I mean that's good. It's good that he's trying to do something, but it's something that isn't working, and he keeps going and going and going. And just a note here, Väinälä, Kalevala, Joukola, those are all kind of by names for just places, the general world here and all that. Väinälä would be like his place, Väinämöinen's place. Joukola is like Joukahainen's place. Kalevala, we know, is just kind of like the known world sort of thing, right? But he's not getting there. He's going across all of the known world, and he's not getting there. He's not getting anything in this land of his that is the result that he wants. So
for sure, it reminds me of, well, again, like societal problems where the government tries to fix it and what they're doing isn't working. So then it's like, well, we'll just put more money into it. Sometimes that works, but usually it's the tactics aren't working, and you'd have to change tactics for the money to actually do good, but it doesn't. It's just shoveling good money after bad. And I think that's it is a pretty typical response, right? Like, or let's say I've done this before, like you're trying to build something maybe from IKEA or like a kid's toy, and the pieces just aren't going together right. So instead of instead of using one of the little tools properly and sort of figuring it out, you just like push harder or apply more force, and hopefully you don't break it, but usually you mangle it in some way and it does stick, but it doesn't look as good, or it doesn't work as well as it should. And yeah, it's just, the answer isn't usually apply more force. It's usually do something different. But I like that they have Väinämöinen just really applying more force, because I think that is what society does. Usually it just applies more force. Societies in general aren't as agile as individuals in solving problems, because generally you're trying to take everyone's opinion into account and do stuff, and it takes a long time to get stuff done. And I think there's even mention of Aino's agility at some points in here, where she has that agility to move and deke and dodge, but Väinämöinen's much slower, and all he can really do is apply more force, but there's not a lot of tactics or strategy that he can apply in a quick enough manner to capture her again.
Right, and so the result here is just that she is apparently gone. Like, I mean, it said she'll never be in his life again. But you know how he deals with that, right? Is something like, well, we might want to move on here fairly quickly here, because you know how he deals with that is kind of what we're after, I guess.
Well, let's go. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, this is going to be lines 165 to 191. Back to the poem. Then the aged Väinämöinen bowed his head, lamenting deeply, with his cap adjusted sideways, and he spoke the words which follow. Oh, how grievous is my folly! Weak am I in manly wisdom. Once indeed was understanding, insight too conferred upon me, and my heart was great within me. Such in former times my portion, but in days that now are passing, in the evil days upon me, now my strength with age is failing, all my understanding weakens, and my insight has departed. All my judgment is perverted. She for whom long years I waited, whom for half my life I longed for, Väinämöinen's fair water maiden, youngest daughter of the surges, who should be my friend forever and my wife throughout my lifetime, came and seized the bait I offered, in my boat sprang unresisting, but I knew not how to hold her. To my home I could not take her, but she plunged amid the waters, diving to the depths profoundest.
Well, if that isn't like the best image of how a society sort of crumbles, I don't know what is. Like that it's capturing everything we've just been talking about, where Väinämöinen and culture and society desperately wants this young woman because of the rejuvenation that she will bring, and the basically the new life she'll breathe into culture. And we have, Väinämöinen, his understanding is weakening, his insight has departed. So Väinämöinen is the great hero, but now his powers are kind of failing him in regards to attracting Aino. And then he didn't recognize that he had Aino in his boat. And I don't want to, I'm going to say take advantage of having Aino in the boat, but I don't want it to sound like taking advantage of her in an acting poorly kind of way, but just like he had her, but couldn't recognize how to engage with her in a way that would get what he needs, really, because he needs a mate. He needs someone to be with him, a friend and a mate forever. So it's an interesting way. It reminds me of the description of the Wolf Age in the Voluspa, just from a very different perspective, in that like the Wolf Age is described as families taking up arms against each other within the family, and the imagery is much more violent, but it's saying the same thing, that the institutions of culture and society are crumbling and weakening. And that's what we're seeing here. This is what Väinämöinen is lamenting, that the institutions in society and culture have weakened to a point where he couldn't even recognize the very thing that he wanted and would rejuvenate him.
Right. And he's also realizing that he is to blame as well here. He's not necessarily getting all the way to, say, understanding that he was to blame for the original reason she left and drowned and all that, but he is seeing that he is to blame. He's understanding the depth of the issue, the situation, that he is losing wisdom and he is in decline. He's realized that now. So there is something that he could do here. And he's understanding the entire situation now, right? Which is just what I think needs to be done for there to be any change, for there to be any hope of Väinämöinen fixing this. And, Kalevala, as we said, 50 runos long. His story isn't over. He's not in decline, and that's just it for him. He's the hero. And so it's interesting that this whole cycle is coming right at the beginning here. I think there is something to, there was like that golden age at the beginning, and now there's been a decline, but then maybe the entire rest of the story is really the actual heroic portion, and that's interesting.
Definitely. No, it's sort of that obstacle that the hero has to overcome. And I think that's what we're seeing, is that we're going to see Väinämöinen have to sort of deal with the issues that have come up in this, and ultimately try and overcome them so that society and culture and all the good stuff doesn't just fall away.
Definitely. Should we finish this off?
I think so.
This is going to be lines 192 to the end. Back to the poem. Then he wandered on a little, and he walked, in sadness sighing, to his home direct returning, and he spoke the words which follow. Once indeed the birds were singing, and my joyous cuckoo hailed me, both at morning and at evening, likewise too in midday hours. What has stilled their lovely music, and has hushed their charming voices? Care has stilled their lively music, sorrow checked their cheerful voices. Therefore do they sing no longer, neither at the sun's declining to rejoice me in the evening, nor to cheer me in the morning. No, now no more can I consider how to shape my course of action, how upon the earth to sojourn, how throughout the world to travel. Would my mother now were living, and my aged mother walking, she would surely tell me truly how to best support my trouble, that my grief may not o'erwhelm me, and my sorrow may not crush me, in these weary days of evil, in this time of deep depression. In her grave his mother wakened, answered from beneath the billows. Still thy mother lives and hears thee, and thy aged mother wakens, that she plainly may advise thee how to best support thy trouble, that thy grief may not o'erwhelm thee, and thy sorrow may not crush thee. In these weary days of evil, in these days of deep depression, seek thou out the maids of Pohja, where the daughters are more handsome and the maidens twice as lovely, and are 5 or 6 times nimbler, not like lazy girls of Yoko, Lapland's fat and sluggish daughters. Thence a wife, O son, provide thee from the fairest maids of Pohja. Choose a maid of fair complexion, lovely too in every feature, one whose feet are always nimble, always active in her movements.
Well, this is interesting, and this is where I was remembering the nimbleness. So Väinämöinen goes back to his mother, who is sleeping beneath the billows, so like deep within chaos and the unconscious. And her advice to him is to sort of go into the unknown and find it like a lovely maiden who can become his wife, and I think ultimately produce offspring and sort of be the rejuvenation of Väinämöinen and culture and society. And it's interesting how he talks, or how she says that you'll find better girls than the lazy girls of Yuko and Lapland's fat and sluggish daughters. I could see like you could see that as sort of sour grapes, like, oh, don't worry, honey, you're much too good for her. But I do think there might be something there in that the daughters of Pohja recognize part of the game that says, in order to continue the species, continue on, you do have to participate in this, and so are better able to deal with the idea of marrying someone old like Väinämöinen and can react to life in a better way than killing themselves and sort of like permanently being like, no, I'm out. And so, and that's exactly what his mother suggests he do, is go find someone who's better able to, I would say, almost knows about life and the hardships of life, and have accepted that in a more complete way than Aino, who I don't want to put too much blame on her. She was quite young in the story. Probably talking like 14 range. Yeah. So, I mean, think back to when you were 14, we were all like idiots. Didn't know anything. So there's no ill will or like, I guess, bitterness towards Aino, but I do think the mother, Väinämöinen's mother's like, actually, no, there are people who are better matched for you, but you're going to have to leave your land in the known world to go and find them.
Right. And this is actually just reminding me of the parallel here of from the Bible, actually, the story of Abraham. He was quite old and still within the known area, within his father's area, and he was told by God to go out into the unknown and make a family and everything like that, and he does, but he was old at the beginning. It's so weird how there's just parallels like that fit on so many different levels. And of course that's really high level, but it's still like there's something from like way far on the other side of the world that kind of had similar ideas of someone who's already old and wise to some extent, right? But still having to rejuvenate themselves and make a tribe and all that. And that's just significant there. But he gets it right though, in that he looks for the wisdom of his mother, which would just be, I suppose, it would be the analog of the wisdom of the father, just from the symbolic feminine perspective, right? And I guess that's what he needs here in order to get through this. And he's saying, right, like I don't know my way forward here, right? And to me, it's almost slightly comical that the answer is something like, well, just try and focus on someone else. There's more fish in the sea, something like that. But it fits though. It's like, here, you had a goal, you didn't succeed in the goal. Here, have another goal. And to go for the maidens of Pohja, again, that's like, we went through this in the first couple of episodes on the Kalevala, how Kalevala is like the known world, and Pohjola basically means the unknown in general, right? So he's got to go out there and he's got to find someone from the unknown, not from his tribe. And that's part of how, like, I think society's kept things from stagnating on a literal level. Like they went and, the gene pool was cross pollinated, right? Literally. And so that stopped genetic stagnation. So this is like right down to that level. This is what Väinämöinen needs to do, right? So on the whole here, it's kind of like, well, he's realized that he screwed up in terms of how he related to Aino, and it's to the point where he has to go even abandon like the whole country where he's from, right? But he's got another goal now. And that says something. Like, whether it's on an individual level or on a larger societal level, you need to have a goal, right? And society needs to have a goal. Society needs to be going somewhere. Society can't just be stagnating into nothingness. That's just going to result in a whole lot of people having a really tough time trying to make ends meet as things spiral downwards. But if society has a goal and is trying to do some things and trying to actually make things better, and by the way, like, society, that's not like a monolithic, and but it is. It's a symbolic thing, but it's not any one person, right? It's not that any one person is all of society, kind of in a thinking, controlling manner. It's just that society operates like this, like kind of on a symbolic level. Society is kind of moving as this big hulking monolith, this leviathan, right? Like that is the term, right? For
yes,
yeah, and so it's on a symbolic level, but because it's so many people participating in it and working at making it grow and prosper, right? Well, then that becomes sort of the one symbolic thing. And so this society needs to be going somewhere. It needs to have somewhere to grow and to prosper in order for there to be anything worthwhile. Otherwise, it is just going to stagnate.
No, that's exactly it. There has to be a direction, and that works like from the individual level all the way up. I mean, a person who doesn't have a goal or an aim, they stagnate, and there's no, and stagnated is even a bit of a misnomer. There's really just like developing and going forward or deteriorating. There's like, you can't stay the same. These are your options: growth or deterioration. And so you have having that goal means you're going towards growth. You're at least aimed in that direction. I mean, lots of things can happen and go wrong and all that kind of stuff, but if you're at least aimed in that direction, there will be growth, and you won't just stop. And I think in some ways humans are a lot like sharks, in that if they stop moving, they start to die, and sharks, if they stop moving, they die. So yeah, you always need that goal, that next thing.
Definitely. And so now Väinämöinen, of course, he has had this tragic thing happen to him. And again, not to trivialize Aino. I mean, we really talked a lot about Aino in the previous episode, the Fate of Aino there. But now this poem has been focusing on Väinämöinen inside of it, and he has had this tragic thing happen to him, which is the loss of the potential life with Aino, and this was what he wanted, and waiting for half of his life for, something like that. This would be a really hard thing to handle, and this poem has been the process of him getting through that, through dealing with his grief through a lot of different ways, through the original fishing. Then he even catches Aino, he encounters Aino, but he's unable to hold her, and he goes and keeps doing the same thing. It doesn't work. He finally has this realization that, oh yeah, maybe this isn't working. But then he's left despairing. Like, what am I going to do if it's not these things I've been trying? And so he goes back into the old wisdom, which is what his mother's wisdom represents. And well, the answer is, get yourself another goal. Go find another person. Go find a better wife. And now Väinämöinen has a goal and some purpose.
Yeah, it sounds like we're kind of at the beginning of an adventure.
Definitely exciting, huh?
For sure.
We'll dig into, of course, where Väinämöinen goes in future episodes, but for now, that's going to be it for today. And of course, you might be noticing this is somewhat shorter than some of our episodes, and really just what that's from is that this is relatively short compared to the other Kalevala episodes, and it's not like the first one where we had to really set the foundations of it. Now we're into the narrative, and there's some longer poems here for sure, but a lot of them are quite a bit are quite short, like this one too. So we'll have some shorter episodes with the Kalevala, but that's okay. We don't need to reach a certain length of the episode just because that would just make for a whole lot of useless rambling, and we didn't have too much of that this time. So
yeah, no, we'll try and keep the useless rambling to a minimum. However, the useful rambling, well, we'll do that all day. But yeah, no, it's a much shorter poem. It's like 3 or 4 pages, but still like well worth it. There was a lot going on in here, so
yeah, there was, and it was a good way to recap and work through the Fate of Aino, which was just a heavy episode. Like honestly, that was a hard one to dig into and to spend time thinking about. Like that, it really was. And if you listen to that one, like I'm sure you were feeling some of the things we were feeling, which was just it was a sad one. It was a hard one to get through. And this one is a little bit of working through that and then moving forward, which I think we need to do when you got the Fate of Aino just kind of hanging over you there. So it's definitely good to be moving past that and into other stories. And that really is not to minimize what that story represented. That was a significant story and worth reading and worth learning the hard lessons that were there. But now this one, I think, is a little bit of processing that and getting past it in a positive sense, not to ignore any of it, but to integrate it and to move forward.
Yeah, you're used to the word integrate. That's perfect. Like, yeah, this is the process and the integration of the hard won lessons of the Fate of Aino. And yeah, so it's not all like streamers and fireworks moving on, but it's not. We're kind of coming out of we're coming out of the underworld and often to the unknown, which will have its own adventures, I'm sure, for Väinämöinen.
Exactly. So thank you for listening with us and joining us for this. And if you don't mind just sticking around with our usual just reminder of all the ways you can get in touch with us and support us, we'd appreciate that. And so on that note, it's of course, we're on Facebook, Twitter. That's at Northern Myths or /Northern Myths. On Instagram and YouTube, we are Northern Myths Podcast. And we're both on Twitter at North Myth Dan and North Myth Luke. And you can get in touch with us there. We love getting comments, messages. Definitely reach out. We love hearing from you. And if you want to help support the show, best ways to do that. If you want to share on social media, it's great to be able to reach more people, and reviews on iTunes are especially helpful for that. To just gets us in front of more people who see that people are listening and like the show and might give us a try. So that's definitely something big that you can do to help us. And if you haven't checked out our YouTube channel, we're also trying to grow a little bit there. And if you wouldn't mind giving us a subscribe there, that's also one major way that you can help us out, regardless of whether you listen on the podcast or watch on YouTube. That's a huge way you can help us, is by subscribing on there. And we're going to do more with our YouTube channel. We're just kind of figuring that out at the moment. A few of the things we were doing weren't quite so working out, but we'll get some new things going there, and hopefully you're along with us on that. And of course, we also have our merch store. And if you're watching this on YouTube, Dan's got our Northern Myths Podcast shirt. We've got a few designs available there on the web shop, as well as some mugs for all the designs there, if you like that. And yeah, if you want to pick any of that up, the link will be below in the description. And we also have on our website a list of recommended books, music, things that we find influential, inspirational, and that have tied into the show and really are good ways to branch out after listening to our show if you want to read more, learn more. And of course, we all love music, and some of our guests have been quite musical, and so we've got some recommendations there, and a little bit goes towards the show if you decide to purchase any of these books or things through the Amazon link, or even anything through the Amazon link. It looks like someone bought their textbooks over Black Friday, I think, and that was after they clicked our link, and so we got a little bit of commission there. And so I thank you to whoever did that. And so that's just one way you can help support your show, is doing your Amazon shopping through our link. Major way to support us, and so we certainly appreciate that.
Absolutely. That's cool that someone bought textbooks through our link. No, I definitely appreciate that.
And I think that's about it for us today. Is there anything I'm missing, Dan?
Well, there is one thing, and it's the most important thing, and that is to go out and find out which myth you're living.
This has been the Northern Myths Podcast. Thank you very much for listening.